All right, folks, if I could get your attention, we're going to get started. We are live, and I'm Representative Kathleen James, here to welcome everybody to our weekly meeting of the House Democratic Caucus. Just a few quick announcements. The floor schedule this week. Tomorrow, we will be meeting on the floor at 3 p.m. Thursday, 3 p.m., followed by mandatory ethics training for all members of the House, and Friday, we will be on the floor at 9:30 a.m. Just so folks know, the House Appropriations Committee is going to be meeting this week temporarily in the pavilion, room 270, while their committee room is being reconfigured. So if folks are looking for approps, they're in pavilion 270 this week. And finally, the House Rules Committee will be meeting this Thursday at noon. So our agenda will be posted and everybody is welcome to follow along. All right, we are going to start out with the illustrious Representative Martin Lalonde from South Burlington and the Judiciary Committee. And I think he's going to be joined by Rep. Dolan.
Good morning. The House Judiciary Committee has been working on a number of bills addressing domestic violence, trying to make it safer for survivors and trying to address what is a very terrible issue in Vermont and in other places. But we have two bills which I'll focus on today, which are up for a vote later this week and will be on the floor next week. And I will also mention another bill that we may be getting to, since it's on the topic, that we've started taking some testimony on, but it's a heavier lift, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the first one is H45, and H45, it proposes to permit a court to issue an order restricting abusive litigation if one party has been found by the court to have abused, stalked, or sexually assaulted another party. So this does happen. An individual can be found to have abused or sexually assaulted somebody, and that abuser can have a final order, relief from abuse order against them, a finding by the court that abuse occurred, criminal prosecution and conviction. And that individual can use the courts to further abuse the survivor. It's a thing that happens by filing cases against the survivor, by filing multiple motions against the survivor. You know, the survivor has to take the time off of work to respond. It may cost money if the survivor has to hire an attorney. So it does happen. And we did have testimony from a couple different individuals, one person from legal aid and one person who is a survivor who has been dealing with this and has had to deal for 5 years, endless cases being filed. One might ask, why is the court not doing something about this? Well, I mean, the court does have a tool already. It's called Rule 11, which I won't really get into, but it's a rule that allows a court to sanction an individual who is bringing frivolous or vexatious litigation against somebody, but it's seldom used. And part of the problem is you could have multiple judges dealing with a particular individuals in the cases. So there's not that continuity to understand that there's been this pattern of abuse. So what the bill does is, if an individual has a final order or has been found guilty of sexual assault or domestic abuse, and is bringing a lawsuit against the survivor, a lawsuit that doesn't have a basis in fact, doesn't have a basis in law, has been found already to be baseless and rejected, the court can issue an order that prevents that individual from bringing any additional litigation against the survivor or the survivor's dependents. The person can get leave of court. You know, we have to leave the path to the court open for that individual, but the person has to be essentially pre-cleared by the court before they can file any further cases that would be against the survivor. So I think it's a great bill. It does happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen a ton of times, but I think we're going to probably have a pretty good support for this bill in our committee as well. I will mention the second bill before we turn to Karen. The second bill is actually one that is a heavier lift, which we might not get to this session, but it's certainly on our agenda. And that has to do with coercive control. So currently right now, one can seek and receive a relief from abuse order if they've been abused and if there's a chance or if it's likelihood that there'll be further abuse. But the abuse that is defined now is physical abuse, and it's actually actions that could in themselves be criminal. Coercive control is a slightly different animal. Coercive control, there isn't a criminal offense against the behavior, but this is absolutely a way that an abuser abuses a survivor by controlling the finances, by controlling the person's schedule, not letting the person meet friends anymore, threatening behavior, etc. So the bill would establish an additional way to show there's been abuse by showing a pattern of these different behaviors that are coercive towards the survivor. It's also a really good bill, and we are hoping to get to it, but that one's a little bit further off. So I'll turn this over to Karen.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing a bit about H41. And H41 is an act relating to referral of domestic and sexual violence cases to community justice centers. And it is a bill that creates a new tool in the form of restorative justice for survivors of sexual and domestic violence to seek justice, repair harm, and create paths forward. Currently, community justice centers are prohibited from taking referrals involving sexual and domestic violence. In 2007, when I call them CJCs, community justice centers were first established, it was kind of a different time. SV and DV, sexual violence and domestic violence referrals, were intentionally left out of that statute. Basically for two reasons. One, the Vermont network at the time was unsure if that was the path that made sense, and restorative justice was brand new to the state in many ways. And so they were intentionally left out. Now we fast forward to today, 2023, and CJCs have evolved with comprehensive presence across the whole state of Vermont. And also the Vermont network has shifted its take and actually sees restorative justice as a valuable tool for sexual violence and domestic violence cases. And so H41 is a bill that was created in robust collaboration between community justice centers and the Vermont network and their partner agencies to create a exception to this prohibition that's in statute. And how it would happen is they've made a very clear window of where the exception would happen. Is basically a community would need to say, yes, we want to explore a exception to this, and they would need to enter into a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, between their community justice center and their local network agency to say, okay, we're going to create a plan. This is the types of cases that we want to see. These are the type of interventions that we're going to do. It's going to involve training. It's going to involve evaluation. Basically make sure all the boxes are checked so that they have a intervention that they agree upon. And it's completely voluntary as well for the different parties that are coming into it. So it's not anything that is forced. It is, for me, checks all the boxes. And the other thing that we're going to be looking at is that it'll sunset in 5 years, so that we will revisit it and see, and there's different reports along the way to see how it's going. So it's not a blanket, just take the prohibition off. It's creating a small path to test it out, see how it works, with lots of checks and balances along the way. So we have been taking a lot of testimony out from all the different agencies, and we're hoping for a vote on Friday.
We have questions for reps. Yes, Representative Kornheiser.
Thanks. This is about the CJC intimate partner violence bill. Um, I'm excited about this, and I agree that the court system is not always the best place to handle some of these complex issues. But I also know that our CJCs have really varied capacity around the state. And so I'm curious what would be done as part of this bill to strengthen some of their capacity to handle this level of complexity,
Yes.
including the consenting part with the harmed party.
Yes. So that is one of the pieces, is creating the MOU that's going to be between the Vermont Network Partner Agency in their area of the state with their Community Justice Center, that nothing can be started, no referrals can start to be had by that Community Justice Center until there is a signed MOU that the network, so it's really relying a lot on the network agency to make sure all those boxes are checked and they feel comfortable with it. And so it might be a very small start and then expand as they go. But it's a collaboration between those two organizations that's going to create more capacity.
Yeah, Rep. Troiano.
So question for Representative Dolan. I brought domestic violence to our local diversion board a number of years ago, and it was like flatly denied, as you suggested that most justice centers do. What my pitch was that there are varied degrees of domestic incidents between two parties. And it ranges from putting a person in danger of imminent bodily injury, which really doesn't even include touching. But as Representative Lalonde suggested in his bill, that controlling and various things need to be dealt with as well. And then there's, a serious assault, which causes serious bodily injury. So I'm wondering if there's a recognition of the degree of what the incident looks like, not legally, but what actually transpired between two parties. And if that would be considered as I would imagine, serious cases would not be covered by this, but lesser serious cases should and could be. Is that something that's being considered here?
So let me back up a little bit, because I appreciate you bringing that up, that there's different severity of the types of cases. And that's one of the benefits of the community justice system that we have, is that they can intervene with a restorative intervention at all the different intercept points of the criminal justice system, from before a crime has even happened, but there is some incidents there, some situation, maybe it's a low level piece, to somebody has been sentenced and convicted, but yet there's still an opportunity to repair harm and discuss how to move forward. So I don't know if there's necessarily this type of crime or that, but it is somebody who is a survivor of domestic and sexual violence seeking a restorative option for intervention anywhere along that point. Right now, they can't be seen at all through the Community Justice Center, and this is creating a doorway so they can, as long as they want to, and the two entities have an MOU together.
Yes, Representative Mahali.
Hi, for Representative Dolan, how are the community justice centers funded? Do they receive state funding? Do you think there's a relationship between the capacity issue and the funding?
So I think that's a whole nother topic that needs to be discussed. And we actually are looking at the whole network of restorative justice and how that works across the state in our committee as well. So stay tuned.
Okay. Representative Sheldon from the Environment and Energy Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, here she comes.
And now for something completely different. I am pleased to be bringing back to the body the Community Resiliency and Biodiversity Protection Act, otherwise known as 30 by 30, which establishes goals and statutes of conserving 30% of our lands by 2030 and 50% by 2050. For those of you who were here last year, you know that we passed this bill with a strong majority on the floor of the House. It made it through the Senate, and the governor didn't appreciate the bill, but we're bringing it back because I think it's really important. And it is a bill that will ask the Agency of Natural Resources to develop a strategic conservation plan that will utilize Vermont conservation design, which is a framework that's been developed by our own Department of Fish and Wildlife. That will ensure that we can conserve at least 85% of the species in the state of Vermont. So we do a lot of great conservation work in the state, but this bill will bring it together and develop a plan for us to do that. It sets those goals in statute. And for those of you who don't know, those are both international and national goals also around the climate and biodiversity conversations that are happening. And it's also in line with our own climate action plan, which makes the recommendation of conserving 30% by 2030. Why do we need the bill? Because the opportunity is now. As they say, they're not making any more land. And we know that we are losing to development about north of 10,000 acres a year in the state of Vermont. And at that rate, we can't wait to make a strategic plan. Let's see. I guess I just want to say that our undeveloped, both natural lands and working lands are critical both to our communities establishing resiliency in the face of climate change, as well as to the conservation of biodiversity. And it also, actually, to me, it's such a multi-benefit plan because it will ensure that we have the Vermont we know and love into the future. So I am looking for folks who want to co-sponsor this bill, and I'll be taking signatures until Thursday afternoon. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm just curious, do you know how much land is conserved currently? I'm just wondering what the gap is.
Yeah, thanks for that. Not great with math on the on the fly, but I do know that the conservation organizations have come to a general agreement that they think 24% of lands are actually conserved in their natural state. So that's a pretty good sign. We're pretty close on the 30% goal. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. All right, I think that's it for the bills we had planned to discuss with you today. Do any members of our caucus have bills that they're looking for sponsors on or want to briefly introduce? We'll try to keep them quick if that's okay. Representative Stevens?
Thank you. I have two bills here. They're for those of you, again, who have been here before, these are returning bills. You've heard of these before. And for new members, you haven't. One is a homelessness Bill of Rights. We have come across over the years many situations where people who are experiencing homelessness are having difficulties being served in restaurants. They're being told that they can't sit in public areas, public accommodations. And so over the years, this bill has been developed. It's been on our wall for quite some time. We did not take it up during the recent pandemic homelessness crisis because we were dealing with actually getting people into housing and making sure that they could survive. But as we start moving back towards the normality, we'd like to move forward with this bill. At one point, there were constitutional questions about it, and we have, I believe this draft addresses some of those, and hopefully we'll be able to get this across this year. We came very close back in 2019. The second one is, again, another bill that's been on our wall for some time, and its time is long past due, is to make sure that employers can provide employees with breaks so that they can take a rest or go to the bathroom or what have you. Again, past testimony has shown that certain, especially in the service economy, and I'm thinking about gas stations, et cetera, where people are, it's so understaffed where people aren't allowed to take a break. And I don't have to go into detail about the health and stress issues relating to having to hold yourself in for any amount of time simply because you can't get away. But this would also, this would not usurp union contracts. So I think about nurses, for instance, who are on long shifts, who don't have time, or teachers who don't have time. They have union contracts that may or may not deal with it. But anyway, it's a labor bill. It's not a simple bill at all. The testimony we took against it was your local mom and pops, or even your Walmarts of the world, who didn't want to be mandated to give their employees simple health breaks. So I'll be up here for about 10 minutes after caucus to get signatures. I'm not going to turn it into later on this week. Thank you.
Do we have questions for Chair Stevens? Okay. Representative Boslin.
Hi, I have a short form bill that is being co-sponsored initially by Elizabeth Burrows. It relates to making rental caps. I have a constituent who had a housing contract for their apartment or for a 2-bedroom place, $1,500 a month, and they were told at the renewal time that it was going to raise to $3,000. And so basically what this rental cap does is it looks at a 12-month period, and it says that from 1 year to the next, you cannot raise the rent more than 6%, although there is a small variation there where they can look at the consumer price index and perhaps adjust it if there's been an extraordinary period of inflation. It also regulates excessive security deposits. So if people are interested in that, I've got the original. I'm happy to take your signatures, and I'm hoping to turn it in by the end of the week.
Thank you. Representative Bartholomew.
Has anyone noticed how far sound will travel from a very loud muffler down a river valley? I have a bill to deal with that if anyone wants to sign on.
Succinct, yet vivid. Anybody else? Representative Sakowicz.
Yeah, I'm collecting signatures now for a bill that would restrict trapping to defensive property and would establish a training for trappers to be able to get a license that would allow them to trap for nuisance trapping. So trappers would be able to allow to trap in defensive property, to defend bridges, property, all kinds of agriculture, things like that. And I will I'd like to submit this bill later in the week. So I would love to get your signatures. I sent it to the, you should see it you should see a link in your mail to sign on, but please see me if you have questions.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? Okay, everybody have a great day.